Hi guys, this is Alex from Mason Lifestyle. Today we're going to be doing a sew along from McCall's 8343. And guys, I'm going to be doing view A, but I'm going to be adding a band just so it feels a little bit more finished. This does have a zipper. So just something that I want to caution you in case you are scared about zippers, but you shouldn't be. This is a regular zipper, so it should be fairly easy for us. So let me show you about the pieces that we're going to need, and this is for knits, right? So we're gonna need piece number 1, and this is the front. And guys, if you notice, I went ahead and raised my neckline. I raised my neckline about 1 inch, and I also shortened the length of the pattern piece by 1 inch, right? So piece number 1, and you're going to need to cut 1 on the fold. You're going to need piece number 2, and this is the yoke, and you are going to cut 4, and then you're going to interface 2. So cut 4, interface 2. You're also going to need pattern piece number 3, and this is the back, and you're also going to cut this on the fold. You're also going to need pattern piece number 4, and this is the color, and you're going to cut 2 on the fold. So here's the fold right there, and then out of those 2, you're going to interface 1. You're also going to need pattern piece number 5, and that is the sleeve, and you're going to cut 2. You're also going to need pattern piece number 6. This is the sleeve band, and you're going to cut 2. And last but not least, this is the lower band, and you're going to cut 2 on the fold. So go ahead and cut your fabric, mark your notches, interface any pieces that need to be interfaced, and let's begin. I went ahead and put on my notches and little dots. And first things first, the pattern is asking us to reinforce this corner. So what we're going to do is we are going to essentially stay stitch from starting about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters ahead of this dot right there. And if you're wondering where is that on your pattern piece, it's right there, that dot, okay? So I want you to stay stitch 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch right before it, get there, and then turn, pivot, and then end at another inch. So again, you're gonna kind of do that corner on both sides, okay? Remember, because this piece, it's cut on the fold, so you should have 2 dots. So again, stay stitch, start 1 inch, pivot, and then go another inch and lock in your stitches on both sides. Go ahead and do that now. Once you do that, I want you to grab some shears, and I want you to cut to that dot, right to that dot, not past that point. Can right there. So now I want you to grab piece number 2, and this is your yoke front, right? And you have a notch on this side, right there, right there. And I want you to go ahead and right face together. And I want you to stitch from the shoulder up to that notch, right? On both sides. So go ahead and do that now. I stitched my yoke front to that opening, and I stopped at that notch. And remember, we are sewing with knits, so you're going to need a narrow zigzag stitch. I'm using a lightning bolt in my machine. And again, I went ahead and did both sides, and now we're gonna put that off to the side. And I want you to grab your back, and I believe that's piece number 3. And the pattern is asking you to reinforce the shoulder seams. You can do that with seam binding. You can do that with clear elastic, whatever you have, just go ahead and reinforce your shoulders. You just want to make sure that over time when you wear your garment that it doesn't stretch at the shoulders. So go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and reinforce your shoulders with a narrow piece of elastic, or if you have seam binding, you can also do that. I am going to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that now. So here it is. I just use a little piece of reinforcement. Again, you can use, if you have thin ribbon, it's just, you just want to reinforce this area on your shoulders. And now I want you to grab your piece number 3 in your front piece with the yokes attached, and you want to join these at the shoulder. Okay, and I want you to stitch 5/8 or 1.5 centimeters. Don't forget to do a narrow zigzag stitch and stitch both of your shoulders. Once you do that, go ahead, press those shoulder seams open. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and attached my front and back pieces. So now, just like we did for this corner piece right in the front, I want you to stay stitch around the edge of the collar because we want to reinforce this as we attach piece number 4, which is the collar. So go ahead and stay stitch, starting at the corner all the way around. Make sure you lock your stitches from start to the end and go ahead and reinforce this collar area. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and reinforced my collar, and I want you to grab piece number 4. You have a notch right there, and you have a notch right there. Okay, I got a little notch right there, but it's there. And with right sides together, I want you to go ahead and pin. So go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance or 1.5 centimeters and attached your collar to that yoke and shoulders. Okay, go ahead and do that now. I attached my collar to the front yoke and the back, right? That's what it's gonna starting to look like. And I want you to go ahead and press this seam allowance open. And I also want you to grab your shears and go ahead and cut this right here. And we're doing this because we really want to make sure that this part of our collar lays flat, okay? So you almost kind of always want to do that, but just make sure that you're not going through your stitches. So just go ahead and do that. Once you're done, go ahead and take it to your pressing station and just press the seam allowance open. And if you also want to go ahead and trim your seam allowance, you can also go ahead and do that. Go ahead and do that now. So we went ahead and attached our collar, and I also told you to go ahead and press these seams, right? And also grade your seams because you got 5/8 inch seam allowance, so you definitely want to reduce the bulk on that. So another thing that I want to talk about, because this is not in the pattern anywhere, but we are about to insert a zipper, okay? And You know, we are working with a knit and we want to stabilize this a little. So I went ahead and grabbed some knit interfacing and I stabilized this area where my zipper is going to go, right? So I definitely would suggest that you guys do just make sure that you press this seam allowance and you reduce the bulk on that. So once you do that, I want you to grab your zipper. So I want you to grab your zipper and, right, our zipper is, I'm going to kind of show you, it's going to go start on the left side, right? And when we stitch it in, it's going to look like that, okay? So remember, we have a seam allowance of 5/8. So I'm just going to put a pin right here. And don't worry about the zipper pull for now. I'm also going to pin this right here because I want to make sure that my seam allowance is open. Okay. And you may have to cut your zipper. Don't worry about that now. Just go ahead and pin it in place. And keep in mind, you're probably going to end up around this area right here. So I'm going to grab my seam gauge and kind of I'm going to grab my seam gauge and I'm going to measure from the bottom right here, 5/8 or 2.5 centimeters. So it looks like I'm going to be stopping right there. And I'm going to put that right there because I want to make sure that I stop in case I have to finish off my zipper and cut it off, all right? So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we are going to attach one side of the zipper. All right, so I have my zipper foot on my machine and you notice how here's the edge. I'm going to try to keep this at 3/8 inch seam allowance. See if I can do this. So don't forget to stitch and of course back stitch to lock in those stitches. And you're going to try to get as close as possible to the zipper. Take out the pin. And I move my zipper pull out of the way. But you can always stop and then lift your foot and then move the zipper pull back to the start. I'm going to do that with the camera off because I need both hands. All right, so I moved that zipper pull out of the way and I'm going to keep pull that pin out of the way. And I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. I attached one side of the zipper, right? So it's going to look like that once we are done attaching the other side. So now I want you to open up your zipper, okay? And remember, we are going to, and I made some marks here on my zipper. Remember at the bottom where I want to start and stop. So I'm going to put a pin right there.
put another one right here because I want to make sure that I keep my seam allowance open right in that spot. And then another one at the end.
I usually like to test this, right? And the spot where I'm going to have to be careful is right here where they join, okay? But see that? So that's how your zipper is going to look. So go ahead and attach the other side of the zipper just like we did. Take your time, okay? So I would definitely say make sure that you start right in that spot right there. And if it's easier, you can always close it down, okay? And attach the other spot and then move your zipper pull out of the way. So same thing, and I'm starting where I just matched the other side and I moved the zipper pull out of the way. And of course I gotta lock in my stitches. And I'm gonna stop right here and move my zipper pull out of the way. I just need both hands. I went ahead and I attached my zipper, and I want to make sure that when you are attaching your zipper, this area right here where they meet at both sides, that they meet, all right? You want to make sure that that does indeed happen. It's just you want to make sure that it's looking pretty nice. And then here's another little tidbit that I usually see on a lot of ready to wear. They usually have a small little tab where your zipper ends. So I usually like to put just a small piece of fabric right there, and I'm going to attach this. I'm going to attach this to the actual zipper at the bottom in my machine. And keep in mind, I have to cut this. And I need to straighten it out. But when it's gonna happen is when I open and close my zipper, there's gonna be a small piece of fabric right there. It's gonna look like that. And it's just gonna look like a nicer finish. All right, so that's an optional thing if you wanted to do, but go ahead and insert your zipper. So the next thing that the pattern's asking you to do is go ahead and finish stitching this front area at the bottom, right? So go ahead and you have that dot right there on the corner. I want you to match it right there with that dot. Okay. Remember, that's why we reinforce this right here. So go ahead and take this to your sewing machine, and again, stitch 5/8 inch or 2.5 centimeters. Start at the top on the left side, and then on that dot that we put in our pattern piece, I want you to stop, pivot, keep going, 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then get to that other corner, pivot, and keep going, and finish right there, and make sure that you lock in your stitches. Go ahead and do that now. I'm going to kind of try to show you with one hand how to do this. And I'm keeping my pin there because I really want to make sure I get to that spot. So Okay, so I got to that spot. Now you want to lift your presser foot, keep your needle down, all right? And you want to turn your fabric right there. That spot, and then you want to keep, again, put your presser foot down and keep stitching. So here it is. I went ahead and attached that bottom piece. I don't have sharp corners, but I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. It just needs a good press. So I'm good with this for now. And there's that little tab at the bottom. It's just ever so slightly. You don't see a ton of it, but I want to make sure that I don't have that finish of the zipper right there. So now I'm going to put this off to the side. And I want you to grab your the front color facing, and I want you to stitch 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter all the way around, and I want you to press that all the way around. Okay, once you do that, I want you to grab your collar piece, and you have those notches right there, and you have that notch right there, and I want you to pin. This is a great pattern if you want to start working a little bit with coats where you have facings, where you have a lot of those square, sharp corners. Great pattern for that. Okay, so and I want you to go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter on both sides, and go ahead and press those seam allowances open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so we got that done, right? And how do you know that you did an amazing job? You got no puckers. Remember, we're sewing. Take your time. You're not in a race here unless you need this by the end of the day, which you're crazy. But, right? You don't want to have any puckers or anything like that. Obviously, the fact that we're working with a knit helps a little, okay? But now we're going to practice some good old-fashioned good sewing. So we have this curve right here, right? So we definitely want to make sure that we clip into that. Do not cut your stitches because it would not be the end of the world, but it's not so great. So again, on the other side, clip those stitches, right? And I would even say trim the seam allowance, but not just yet, okay? I would definitely say go ahead and press your seam allowance open, okay? Press that open on both sides. And I would even say make sure that you press this 5/8 of an inch, which is your seam allowance, or 2.5 centimeters. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and I pressed my seam allowance open, okay? So now I want you to grab your bodice and I want you to pin this matching up there. Okay, and I want you to pin this all the way across that collar. We're going to do something a little different from what the pattern's asking for, but not too far off. All right. Then we also have this area right here, and you want to make sure that you keep that seam allowance open on both sides, okay? I want you to go ahead and try to stop as perhaps stop like a little bit, a few inches before you get to the end. The pattern has you really just stitching this top piece and then slip stitch the rest. But I know that you can do a little more, okay? So that's why I'm saying go ahead and pin and just give yourself a couple of inches. You're gonna have to be very careful because you have a zipper right there, okay? So now I want you to stitch, okay? I want you to start right here, and you are going to do I would say a 3/8 inch seam allowance, because remember, you have a zipper right there, okay? So 3/8. If you are like, I'm so scared, then do a 1/4 of an inch. It's okay. You just want to attach the facing to that zipper area. Keep going up, and then when you get up here, okay, and then grab your seam allowance or your seam gauge. Hold on. When you get to this spot, okay, grab your seam gauge and just go ahead and mark it where you need to pivot, okay? Right there, I need to pivot. That's 5/8 or 2.5 centimeters. Keep going all the way down, okay, across the back of the facing of that color. Again, pivot, okay, which will be around here. Pivot, okay, and then pivot, and then keep going down and stop right here. Go ahead and do that now. I went ahead and attached my facing, okay, and I got it to as close as possible as I could to the bottom. And guys, I could have kept on going, right? But I want to make sure that I don't put this so tight to the zipper where it has issues opening and closing, okay? So I'm going to now go ahead and slip stitch all of that in, slip stitch, probably the dreaded word, right? And I'm going to do that by hand, okay? Just by hand. That's why I had you stitch that right there. So I'm going to make sure that this is beautifully finished all the way around, that my zipper, that I cut it, and that I finish it off. And then same thing, obviously this up here, you're going to grab your shears and you are going to clip into those corners, right? And then trim your seam allowances. And then you're going to go ahead and turn your corner, right? Make sure this all looks clean, nice, and beautiful. So go ahead and do that now. So now I want to make sure that this at the top matches, right? And I want to make sure that you can open it. Okay, so slip stitching. Give this all a really good press. And what you want to do is you want to do this by hand. Okay. And you want to make sure that you're turning in that seam allowance that you pressed into that seam allowance from that collar that you just stitched. Okay, so again, and I'm showing for you from the outside, but again, and it's kind of unusual, I will say, that we're doing this on a knit, but we're gonna go with it, okay? Because I wanna make sure that this all looks beautiful and beautifully done. So again, slip stitch this over here, right around your facing, and cut your zipper. And this seam allowance, I would definitely say trim, and again, pin, okay? Same thing, trim all of that seam allowance, and I'll do that. I just want to show you that you just want to grab all of this facing fabric and slip stitch. And you want to slip stitch all the way around. Can you do this by your machine? Yeah, sure you can. But if you want it to look finished from the outside and the inside, stitching by hand will be the best way. Go ahead and do that now all the way around. There was a lot of slip stitching involved. Let me show you guys, because that is the right side and this is the wrong side. So I went ahead and slip stitched all of this all around this bottom area. It's not completely perfect, but it's good enough and it's comfortable when I wear it. Okay, so now next thing that we have is we are going to attach our sleeves, and I'm gonna do it a little bit different from the pattern because I want to do a little bit different. So grab your sleeve and you have notches. So you have notches on your sleeve, right? 2 notches means the back, 1 notch means the front, and you also have these dots at the top. Usually that's where you are meant to gather stitches, but since this is a knit, I can get away with this, but make sure that you transfer those notches. And then I want you to grab your sleeve. And again, you should have transferred those notches. So there's my 1 notch, and there's my 2 notches, which at least they mean the back. So, and you're going to have to flip your fabric. Let's see. This is, so match that notch on this side. And then you have that double notch right there, and you're going to match it with your sleeve double notch. And then I also put that kind of notch in the center, so that is my shoulder seam. And now I'm just going to ease this in. So go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeters seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. Go ahead and attach your sleeves on both sides. I attached my sleeve. There it is. Right? And if you have any puckers when you are attaching your sleeves, just go ahead and unpick, right? Perhaps maybe 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters on both sides and try to ease it in again. So now that we got that done, I am going to go ahead and match the underseam right there. Okay. And I'm going to pin on both sides.
Pin on both sides.
So now go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. Go ahead and stitch your side seams. Once you do that, go ahead and put your top on. See if you want it a little loose or if you want it a little tighter. Now's your chance. I attach my sleeve and the side, right? And I always like to make sure that my underarm seam always matches. So that's good right there. So now I want you to grab your sleeve cuff if you're doing one. So go ahead and with right sides together, go ahead and pin and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance or 2.5 centimeters. Go ahead and do that for both cuffs. It's going to look like this, okay? And usually if you have a little bit of a bulky fabric like I do, which is just a little bit, I usually like to cut in that center. So we would fold, right? And I don't have that big bump at the on that end, kind of like where those seam allowances meet. Okay, put a pin, and you had a notch right where that center of that cuff goes, right there. And that is going to be the halfway point of your cuff. Okay. So grab your sleeve. Okay. So you want to match that seam to that seam. Okay. You want to match that seam with that seam right there. Okay, and then you also have a notch on your sleeve. That's right there. So if you are looking at your cuff, it just feels like the sleeve is definitely longer than your cuff. It means that you're gonna have to stretch, right? Stretch your fabric. Stretch your fabric at the sewing machine to go ahead and in my case, I have to stretch it quite a bit. So I may have to do some gathering stitches, right? Because my fabric it's a really nice sweatshirt fleece, but let's see. So I did a few gathering stitches on my sleeve just because my sweatshirt fleece, it's pretty thick, which is, I'm going to be very happy wearing this. but it's not so great when you're sewing, but I will explain to you how to fix that. So I did some gathering stitches, and you have my sleeve cuff, and again I'm going to match that seam, that side seam, with the side seam on the cuff, right? So pin right there, and then you have that other notch right there, okay? And now you want to make sure that you have the even amount of gathers on both sides.
You're just going to pin. Okay.
And I'm going to say this, if your fabric stretches quite a bit, then all you have to do is stretch your cuff to meet the width of your sleeve, right? So you will be stretching your cuff as much as possible to meet the width of your sleeve. Do not stretch your sleeve. You want to stretch your cuff, all right? So go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start, at the end. Go ahead and do that for both sleeves. I got the sleeve cuff done. Now, if you want to do a band, just go ahead and grab your 2 pieces of your band. And pin on both sides with right sides together. You should have 2 pieces. Go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance, or 2.5 centimeters on both sides. Go ahead and do that now. So I want you to grab your cuff band. Same thing as we did with the cuffs, right? It's kind of like a hemband, and this is definitely easier to do. So same way that we attach the cuff, find those side hems or that side seam allowance.
Okay.
And again, you're gonna have some extra fabric. So just adjust, right? And again, you're gonna have to stretch this a little bit. And again, when you're stretching, stretch this hemband, not your main fabric, okay? Not your main bodice fabric. All right, guys, now take it to your sewing machine and again, stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. So I went ahead and attached my hemband, and again, side seams match. I'm gonna give this a really good press, and once you do that, you are all done.